Praise the Lord, dear one. We thank God for giving us the opportunity to meet up here once again. By the grace of God, we have been reading through the book of Acts. And also as a Church of Pentecost Kenya, we have been going through our 28-day prayer and fasting. Today, we'll be looking at chapter 27 of the book of Acts. In the previous chapter, that is chapter 26, we saw how Paul was again called to give his narration and explain himself to King Agrippa. However, King Agrippa was not able to give any verdict. He was very much challenged as to what his stand should be. And so Paul is being sent on to Rome so that he can also speak to the governor there. So let's have a look at the reading. After that, we will take our reflections and lessons. And when it was decided that we should sail to Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to one named Julius, a centurion of the Augustan regiment. So entering a ship of Adramyttium, we put to sea, meaning to sail along the coast of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. And the next day we landed at Sidon. And Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him liberty to go to his friends and receive care. When we had put to sea from there, we sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea which is off Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing to Italy, and he put us on board. When we had sailed slowly many days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, the wind not permitting us to proceed, we sailed under the shelter of Crete, off Salmon. Passing it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near the city of Lasea. Now, when much time had been spent and sailing was now dangerous because the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, Men, I perceive that this voyage will end with disaster and much loss, not only of the cargo and ship, but also our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than by the things spoken by Paul. And because the harbor was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised to set sail from there also, if by any means they could reach Phoenix or a harbor of Crete opening towards the southwest and northwest, and winter there. When the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close to Crete, but not long after, a tempestuous head wind arose, called Eurocledon. So when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, we let her drive. And running under the shelter of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship, and fearing lest they should run aground on the Cytus sands, they struck sail, and so were driven. And because we were exceedingly tempest-tossed, the next day they lightened the ship. On the third day, we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Now, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest beat on us, all hope that we would be saved was finally given up. But after long abstinence from food, then Paul stood in the midst of them and said, Men, you should have listened to me and not have sailed from Crete and incurred this disaster and loss. And now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only that of the ship. After there stood by me this night an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar, and indeed God has granted you all those who sail with you. Therefore take heart, men, for I believe God that it will be just as it has been told me. However, we must run aground on a certain island. Now, when the 14th night had come, as we were driven up and down in the Adriatic Sea, About midnight, the sailors sensed that they were drowning near some land, and they took soundings and found it to the 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they took ground soundings again and found it to be 15 fathoms. Then, fearing lest we should run aground on the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship, when they had let down the skiff into the sea, under pretense of putting out anchors from the prow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved." Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the skiff and let it fall off. And as day was about to dawn, Paul implored them all to take food, saying, "Today is the 14th day you have waited and continued without food and eating nothing. Therefore, I urge you to take nourishment, for this is for your survival, since not a hair will fall from the head of any of you." And when he had said these things, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then they were all encouraged and also took food themselves. And in all, we were 270 persons on the ship. So when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and threw out the wheat into the sea. When it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they observed a bay with a beach onto which they planned to run the ship if possible. And they let go the anchors and left them in the sea, meanwhile losing the rudder ropes, and they hoisted the mainsail to the wind and made for shore. But striking a place where 2 seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable, but the stern was being broken up by the violence of the wind. And the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim away and escape. But the centurion, wanting to save Paul, kept them from their purpose and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and go to the land, and the rest some on board and some on parts of the ship. And so it was that they all escaped safely to the land. This is indeed a roller coaster journey for Paul, a journey with a lot of ups and downs and a lot of uncertainties. The reflections that we would like to pick on this is that life can be full of storms, and indeed storms will come. When storms come, sometimes there may be a purpose for which storms have come. Jesus told us in John chapter 16 verse 33, "In the world you will have tribulations and distress and suffering, but be encouraged, be confident, be filled with joy. I have overcome the world." So even though we will go through many challenges and difficult times, Jesus has assured us that we will overcome the world. For many of us, we may never experience, literal or like lifetime storms moving on the sea and all of that, but we will certainly weather figurative kind of storms in our lives. It could be sicknesses, it could be financial challenge, it could be the loss or death of a loved one, it could be anything at all that comes to us as a storm. Storms will come, but when storms come, we will be able to go through if we look unto Jesus. Whatever it is, we can't always predict them and we can't outrun them, but we can navigate through them by the power and presence of God. Yes, storms will come, but we can draw closer to God through them and emerge stronger and bolder in our faith. Whatever storm you may be going through at this time, I want to encourage you that just as Paul kept his faith up and he was able to weather the storm together with the people who were with him, even God told him that none of these people will get lost, and through this many were saved. I want to encourage you with saying that do not lose hope and do not let your faith go down. Trust God that he will be able to take you through the storm. The second lesson on the storm is that when storms comes, they reposition us. The storm moves ship. When the ship is on the storm, it is not, the ship is not just there. The storm is moving the ship to another direction. And so just as a ship cannot remain stationary through a storm, so neither can you. or I. Whatever you are going through, you will not remain the same and you will not come out the same. You will come out much better if only you focus on Jesus, looking unto him, the author and finisher of our faith. The storm brought Paul to a new place. He finally arrived in Rome, where he was going to be tried by the governor. And the captives together with him were also saved. So Paul became a hero even there in the ship and on the journey. He became a commander and he was able to, bring a lot of influence and authority in that space. He was repositioned. Storms represent sometimes opportunities that we may not even see well. But if we look at them through our spiritual eyes, we will see the good side of it. And this is a truth that we see many, many ways in the Bible. You can think of David who faced Goliath. That was a storm at that time, but he came out a hero and somebody who stood for the Lord. You can think of Moses and how he was rejected by his own people, but God used him to deliver his own people. So whenever we go through storms, if only we will keep our focus on Jesus Christ, we will come out better. Remember the Noah's Ark. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 8 verse 4 that even though the ark was on the storm and at some point the storms were heavy, the waves was strong, but the Bible says that God brought the ark to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Every storm you are going through, because you are in the ark of God, you will find rest. God will bring you to a resting place, and you will see the hand of God. So be at peace and trust God to go through it, go through the process, and see the lessons that you can pick from that storm, and also see the hand of God being moved in your life. My encouragement is that let us keep focus on God, and let us dive deeper, trust him more, and cling to his word in times of suffering and in times of storms. The Lord is indeed with you. The victorious life is the life of courage. We cannot go through life without having courage. And that is why God admonishes us to take courage and to keep our faith on him. So that is a lesson for today. God bless you so much. We will round it all up tomorrow, God willing. Stay blessed.